things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever home. Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson with Reality Shifters and the International Mandela Effect Conference, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Hello.
Lasers.
Hello.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live worldwide from a secret mountain cave hidden high up in the beautifully snow-covered peaks of the Idaho mountains. That's right, ripping through the electromagnetic soup, tearing through the atmosphere, and tunneling away in your radio like a quantum particle. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, January 27th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are talking about intent versus reality. Can your thoughts and emotions really affect the physical outcome of a system in reality? There's so much evidence to get into and so little time to get there, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to get this party started, but first, today in history. And as everybody knows, I am more than a bit of a physics and quantum physics nerd, and this one is more for myself than anything. Ladies and gentlemen, on this day in 1926, physicist Erwin Schrodinger publishes his theory of wave mechanics and presents what becomes known as the Schrodinger equation in quantum mechanics. Ladies and gentlemen, that is on this day in 1926, and that is Today in History. Like I said, that one was more for me than anything. I'm really a bit of a physics and quantum physics nerd, for those who don't know. So, yeah, that one was really something interesting to me on this day, right? And, you know, something else that's interesting is consciousness, right? We've been talking about consciousness all month long. And one question in consciousness is, can it affect the matter of the outside world? And we've shown this a lot through the month, but tonight we're really going to focus on this idea, this mind over matter idea, right? So we're going to start out with a guy named Dr. Masaru Emoto. And Dr. Emoto has done a lot of work, may he rest in peace now. He did a lot of work in the field of water. And he actually showed that the human consciousness can really have an effect on water, on something outside of our bodies.
I hope to show people through my research that water has a memory of its own. Dr. Emoto's laboratory does research on water samples, which are subjected to various forms of outside influence. The impressions made upon the water are recorded by swiftly freezing it in a cryogenic chamber. And that at the very beginning was the words of Dr. Masaru Emoto. And Dr. Emoto exposed this water not just to stimuli like a microwave or a cell phone, but actually saying things like, thank you to the water, or things like I hate you or I love you, or just speaking different tones to the water, different words, not even tones, just different words, from I love you to I hate you to you're welcome to just all these different things. And then they would cryogenically freeze the ice crystals, and it's amazing the differential that comes out between them.
because one would think that water's water. It would freeze either way, and it would freeze into ice crystals just like any other time. However, we have found, or Dr. Emoto has found, that the ice crystals actually form differently based on the different stimuli that is given to the water. Again, the stimuli being anything from a cell phone's radiation to saying the words "I love you" to the water, or "thank you," or any list of things.
In all of the world's religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, it is the practice to recite a prayer before taking food or to consecrate the food during major religious holidays. How often do we stop and think, what for? And how did the certainty arise in such dissimilar religions that this is the right thing to do? Why did something that science is only now trying to understand seem obvious to our ancestors?
Which is yet another running theme that we find on this show. Things that seemed obvious to the ancients, we are just now learning, and I still find that absolutely mind-boggling, but that's getting off the topic. Back to what we're talking about here. The doctor's experiments actually have showed that when you pray over food, it comes out with a better water molecule in the end, or ice molecule, than if you don't. Or if you say, "I hate that," opposed to "I like that." And one would think, well, maybe you're just telling yourself that. And I'm sure many times we wonder, is it just a tradition that we pray over our food? Is there any reason we do this besides just thanking God for it? And actually, it changes the water molecules in the food itself. Think about that. The water molecules that are left within the food you're consuming are completely molecularly different based on the blessings that are or are not given, or the intent that is or is not put into it. And I can tell you, working in restaurants, that is one thing that I would always be mind-boggled about, because if somebody makes it with the intent of love, really puts their heart into making something, it has a different flavor than if somebody just throws it together. And I know how insane that sounds, but anybody who's worked in restaurant, you completely understand what I'm saying, I am sure.
It turns out that the frequency of vibrations in the prayers of any religion, uttered in any language, is 8 hertz.
Does anybody recognize that number, 8 hertz? Why is that an important number? I know it's important. Roughly 8 hertz. What else is roughly 8 hertz?
Which corresponds to the frequency of the oscillations of the Earth's magnetic field.
Oh, that's it, the Schumann resonance. I knew that sounded familiar. 7.8 hertz, or basically 8 hertz. And that's really intriguing that it would be lined up right with the Schumann resonance, because we also, as creatures, line up directly with the Schumann resonance. We vibrate at roughly 8 hertz. And when we are outside of the Schumann resonance, it actually affects us by making us sick. So it's interesting that no matter what religion, what language, all the prayers come out at exactly the frequency of 8 hertz. It really makes you wonder if it has something to do with coming back in tune with the earth itself, or with the environment around you. Perhaps that's why when you pray over somebody who's sick and they end up getting better more quickly, perhaps you are literally changing the water molecules within their body just by your intent of prayer.
Therefore, a prayer, pronounced with love, creates a harmonic structure in water, which is an ingredient of absolutely all food. In 1995, Dr. Masaru Emoto was the first one to record musical impressions on water. In Dr. Emoto's laboratory, they presented water with different types of music, after which they froze the water and then under the microscope could clearly see the crystals that the water had formed.
And I do apologize, as busy as I've been lately, I wasn't able to get any screenshots or pictures for this. If you would like to look up these pictures, they're really easy to find. just type in Dr. Emoto water experiment, and there's plenty of charts and graphs of these pictures. And I can tell you that the classical music has a much different effect on the water molecules than, say, heavy metal or rock. Heavy metal and rock having a more negative or nasty looking water molecule, more shaken up, if you will, opposed to a more clean looking molecule or crystal in the classical music.
Dr. Masato Emoto, world-renowned water researcher, messenger of peace, and author of many books, including the New York Times bestsellers, Hidden Messages in Water, The True Power of Water, and most recently, The Shape of Love.
And if you're more interested in Dr. Emoto's work specifically, I would highly suggest any one of the previously mentioned books. Those are Hidden Messages in Water, The Power of Water, and recently, The Shape of Love. So again, if you're interested in his work and more about his work, definitely check out those books.
Emoto's research has visually captured the structure of water at the moment of freezing, and through photographic documentation have shown the direct effect of words, music, and thought on water. Destructive thoughts, compared to those of love, gratitude, and peace, show significant differences.
And what is really amazing about this is one of those experiments that you can actually do at home. And here in a moment, we're going to come up on another experiment that you can also do at home, that it has even more empirical evidence of this very thing.
This revelation that our thoughts can influence water has a profound impact on our health and the well-being of the planet. Here is his message.
Ladies and gentlemen, the voice of Dr. Masato Emoto himself.
Water is a principle of everything. And also, water is a mirror of yourself. That means if you have a peaceful mind, water becomes peaceful mind. And also, world becomes peaceful, because water is a principle of everything. So if each person has a peaceful mind, automatically this universe becomes peace. I believe so. So let's talk with water, and let's ask water, and let's say, thank you, water, and love you, water, and respect you, water.
Thank you, water, love you, water, respect you, water. And he brings up a really good point. We ingest water. We are 70% water, just like the planet Earth. 70% water. So if you figure that if we have these peaceful intentions, if everybody was peaceful and had peaceful thoughts and peaceful intentions, then the water flowing through your body would take on that peaceful molecular structure. And if all the water on planet Earth had that structure, then all the people on planet Earth theoretically would be more peaceful. It's a great idea, but is there really any more empirical evidence than that? Is there any experiments that you could do at home, really simple, to prove it to yourself? Well, actually, there is. There's a really fun and neat experiment called the rice experiment. And if you haven't heard of it, check this out.
Welcome to the rice experiment. It's Dr. Emoto's incredible, powerful way of demonstrating and testing whether or not intention can affect matter. Now, I've seen lots of videos of people and criticisms of people and articles of people skeptical that the rice experiment actually worked. So first, let me tell you what it is, how I did it, and then we can talk about the skeptics and everything else.
Once again, this is a very, very simple do-it-yourself, do-at-home experiment that you can actually prove to yourself whether or not this show has any validity, right? And whether or not this whole idea of mind over matter or energetic patterns has any validity whatsoever. And if you do decide to do this project, I would love to see the outcome. I would love for you guys to take pictures and post your results over on the riponrabbithole.com. That is RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. That's right. Over there, you're gonna go to the Dark Wolf's Den Show group, and there's a forum over there, and I'm going to have a forum thread started called Water Experiment. And you're more than welcome to post your results over there, and I would love to see how many people around the world actually get the same results as we're going to hear about shortly. So if you're interested, guys, we're about to hear about how to do this experiment. If you're interested, once again, and would like to do this, I would love to see the outcomes that you guys get. But outcomes of what? We got to learn how to do the experiment first, right? Let's hear all about it.
So here we go. To do this experiment, 3 jars are filled with equal amounts of rice and equal amounts of water.
Now, I will tell you, I have seen this experiment done both with just dry rice and water poured into it, or I've seen it done with cooked rice. So it can be done either way, just to be clear.
So 3 jars, I put them on my mantle. I put equal amounts of rice in each of them, roughly, not to the grain. I didn't count every grain, but pretty much equal amounts of rice, equal amounts of water from the same source. They were all covered equally tightly to the best of my ability, and they sat next to each other, so there was no difference in the exposure to the elements. 1 jar was labeled with a piece of tape that I wrote love on. 1 jar was labeled with a piece of tape that I wrote hate on, and the other jar was not labeled at all.
Okay, guys, you with it so far? So you need 3 jars, some rice, cooked or uncooked. And if you're going to do uncooked, pour some water in with it. If you're going to do cooked, just put the cooked rice in. Put the same amount in each jar. Seal it up the same way. And then take pieces of tape. On one, write the word love. On the other, write the word hate, or I'll kill you, or just something negative. And the 3rd jar, just leave it alone. Don't do anything special. Don't put any tape on it. Just let it be as your control jar and see what the outcome is.
These 3 jars sat beside each other for roughly 10 or 11 days before I first looked at them closely. And what I did was, the love jar, I would, when I was praying every day, send love to. I would, when I saw it, I would send it love. I would think about it and think about love heading toward it. Everything to do with love.
So the first jar, every day, send it a loving intention. Think about the jar and think about love and how much you love that jar and you love the rice and how much you just send that intent of love to the first jar once a day at least, every day.
The next one, every day, I would yell at, I would think horrible thoughts about. If I had anything negative pop up in the day, I would try to shift it and direct it toward the jar in my mind. And that was that.
So just like the first one, any negative intentions or negative emotions that you have, try to focus that energy towards the second jar with the hate tape or the negative saying tape on it. Any negative energy toward the second one, any positive energy towards the first one, and no energy at all towards the ignore.
And then the ignore jar, didn't have to do anything, just completely ignore it. So after 10 to 12 days, I'm not sure exactly how many, just to be clear, it didn't take that long.
Now remember, a little bit earlier, she said she went into this very skeptically, right? She tried the experiment, but she was kind of on the fence on whether or not it would actually work. So she open-mindedly tried this experiment. Now let's find out what her results were.
something amazing happened. I saw the effects of this experiment, and for anyone who's a naysayer, I highly recommend just trying it yourself.
And I as well highly recommend trying this experiment for yourself. All you need is some rice water in jars. It's really simple, really easy. Take about 10 to 12 days, maybe 2 weeks, 14 days. Do the intent experiment and see what happens. Like I said, I would love to see the results posted over at the riponrabbithole.com. That's RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. Maybe you can even go and drop them down the rabbit hole over there. That's right.
But if you do try it, remember this is an intention experiment. So if you're going into it skeptical and you're not really doing the experiment and you're not really sending the love and you're not really sending the hate and instead you're sending doubt, it probably won't work because your intention is that it won't work. So if you do it, suspend your disbelief for 10 days or 12 days or however long you can, and just jump into this space of imagination and give it a real go. You might be surprised at what happens. After I did mine, I found that many other friends had done it and they had had the same or similar results.
And she brings a very good point. Make sure if you're going to do this experiment, don't go into it with the mindset that it's not going to work. This is an intent experiment. If your intention that is not going to work, then it's not going to work. However, if you go in with the intent that you're going to be open-minded, you're going to try it, you're going to do the daily practices and send the emotions and the intent toward the jars, then you're going to have a likelihood of having an outcome. But what outcome did all these people get? Well, let's find out.
So here are the 3 jars. This is the love jar. The love jar, and you'll see this close up, the love jar has absolutely no mold in it. It has no mold in it, and if I tip it and look at the water looks pretty darn good. It doesn't look like it has any sort, it's just sort of milky rice water. Nothing wrong with it at all. So this is the love jar.
Now, I want to remind you that there's been rice and water just sitting in a jar with a lid on it for 10 to 12 days. There should very well be mold, right? In any general circumstance, there should be mold. Well, let's find out about the hate jar. Let's find out what happened to it.
It's pretty powerful. Here's the hate jar. The hate jar is surrounded in white mold, and a little bit of it is starting to become kind of brownish mold. And it's a bit dark on the inside. And if I tip it and see the water, it's a little murky, but I'm more concerned about all the mold that's growing all along the outside and how it's getting discolored. So that's the hate jar.
And there's a literal film of white mold all the way around this jar, right? This is insane. I mean, it's all through the jar. Now, mind you, in contrast to the one right beside it that had the love intent going to it, that had absolutely zero mold in it. And the only thing different between them is the intentions sent toward the 2 jars. But let's find out what happened with our control sample.
Check out the ignored jar. I don't even have to bring it close to you. Here's the ignored jar. It has a mountain of mold in it. It's a mountain of giant black freakish molds. It's actually green, black, gray, white, fuzzy mold and all sorts of gunk all around it everywhere. So this is the ignored jar.
So basically what one would expect with you got just, organic food sources and water sitting in a jar for 10 to 12 days, just a pile or a mountain of mold. And it's really amazing to me that there's 3 different outcomes of this experiment. 3 different jars, 3 different outcomes, and the only difference is an intent. And again, this is not the first person to do it. This is based on Dr. Emoto's water experiment, because it's the water in the jar that actually, I think, has the biggest effect here. So this is once again an experiment that you can do at home for yourself to prove to yourself that intent of mind and intent energy has more to do with the outside world than it does the brain. And even if it does happen to be just in the brain, even though I don't believe that, but let's take that thought for just a moment, there's still something that needs to explain how the energy of intent can be felt outside of the body. And I can understand we radiate an electrochemical signal, but that does go into the environment and it doesn't radiate off in a large area. So it is still baffling to me, even given their own reasons of consciousness or explanations of consciousness, which I cannot iterate enough and exaggerate enough how much I disagree with. But even then, you cannot use that to explain this experiment at all. There's nothing in science right now that says why this should, could, or is able to happen. And alas, many, many people around the world have done this experiment and showed that it very much does.
I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but this is what this meant to me. I've noticed in my life when I ignore things, they tend to deteriorate. This was a vibrant example of that. I also noticed in my life that when I hate things, they do persist, but they also sort of eat away at me and eat away at whatever it is that I am dealing with, and or the people or the relationships or the anything else. And when I really love things, they tend to thrive. And so my conclusion was, I'm not going to ignore things that are important. Especially myself. That was my biggest conclusion. My second big conclusion was that hating things is really not worth it. It's time to deal with things rather than hold on to hate, because it really does start to rot things a lot. And love, my final conclusion, is really the energy that keeps things thriving and vital and alive. So that was my takeaway from the rice experiment. I highly recommend you try it yourself.
And many, many wise words from such a simple experiment. It's amazing the conclusions that we can draw from this, right? The food we eat could actually make us healthier just by praying over it or blessing it or whatever your belief system would allow. Just by doing these simple actions, even just showing gratitude for having it in the first place. You ain't even got to be religious. Just showing that thankfulness and that gratitude and even saying it out loud before you eat the food can actually make you healthier. So all the religions may have been onto something. And speaking of being onto something, we have got on to time for break. So ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back with the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show right after these messages. Don't you touch that dial. That's right.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Ow! Yes, that's right. Your weekend has officially begun. Hi, everyone. It's AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Give yourselves a round of applause for being smart enough to be here. That's right. The most extended weekends in radio just got better. Guess what? Tuesday nights. Not here on YouTube, but over at the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Your weekend can begin. Oh my goodness. I'm talking about a special backstage VIP chat event hosted by CSFL champion, something new we call Tuesday Night Videos. Now, he's been doing this independently for a little while, but we're giving him the full access next Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021, to host Tuesday night videos in the Backstage VIP chat lounge. So if there isn't a better reason to jump on over to the Ripon Rabbit Hole and sign up for a Backstage pass, let that be the reason. It's going to give you unfiltered access to an evening of fun that will start our weekends on Tuesday to our exclusive members only. Now, this Tuesday night, he is going to be VJing the music of Art Bell. It's going to be a great night. I can't wait. I believe that the room opens up at 6 p.m. Pacific. I'm not 100% certain on the times, so check the schedule for updates, and I'll make sure I get it updated, and I'll let you know before the weekend is over. But guess what? Your week just got a lot shorter. Now, Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den Show will return again tomorrow night, Thursday, January 28th. 2021, starting again at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Join him as he howls in the Dark Wolf's Den cave of psychic phenomena. I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. Then I'll guide you down the rabbit hole for the remainder of the weekend. Friday night, we're going to talk about freely speaking, or speaking freely, and how it may have a price in 2021. Then Saturday night, January 30th, we'll dive through fear itself. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Then Sunday night, we'll end out the weekend right with Independent. Freddie Mercury said it best, "I want to break free." And we're going to end out the weekend right as we break free together. And now, shorter weeks. Isn't that something? We'll return back to tonight's Dark Wolf's Den show, hosted by Jerry Hicks. Mind versus Matter, right here on the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are talking about mind over matter. We've talked about how intent affects water molecules in Dr. Masaru Emoto's experiments, and then we've talked about the rice experiment, and I hope you guys all decide to do that. I would love to see the different outcomes you guys get. That would be absolutely amazing. And then we're going to talk now about the idea that consciousness, since we've proved that intention and consciousness can affect the outside world, at least to some degree, can it affect in a large mass? So if you have a large mass of people or a group of people doing, say, a prayer or any mass thing where you've got a large group of people having the same intent, would that show up on a global basis? Well, that was the question that was asked by a guy named Dean Radin. He is the creator of something called the Global Consciousness Project.
The Global Consciousness Project is an evolutionary step out of 50 years of prior experiments. The experiments were looking at the relationship between mind and matter, and specifically intention and the behavior of the physical world. I mean, it all devolves back into the question, what is the role of mind in the physical world?
And once again, in the first half, we've already shown that the mind in the physical world does definitely have an effect, especially when it comes to intention.
From a Western science point of view, there isn't much. I mean, I as a designer of a car, can get an internal image and an intention to build a car, and eventually a car appears. But that's not a direct link. It requires a lot of work between the intention and the building of a car. But this question is saying more that, is there a direct link between one's intention and the behavior of the world? with an unmediated link, or if mediated, we don't know by what yet.
So to put that in another term that we would know more readily around our communities, that would be manifestation, literal manifestation into reality from thought form.
Well, those experiments typically would use very sensitive physical systems, and then you would ask somebody to direct their intention at it and try to push the system around, make it do this versus that. So a prototype example is flip a coin and wish for heads. And now flip a coin, wish for tails. And you can do that experiment, and it has been done many times. And what you see after loads of data is that the statistics of the system that you're working with are biased in the direction that you want the intention to go.
I play a lot with dice. I've got a set of dice that sit on my desk in front of me, and every now and then I'll grab one or two of them and I'll try to intend the number that I want to come out. And it doesn't always work, but in my opinion, more times than not it does, but I've not actually recorded the data, to be honest, so I can't sit here and say 100% that that is the case. However, the doctor who has run many trials can say that.
Coins are an okay system to work with, but as mechanical things are very difficult to track precisely. So electronic circuits started to be used in the 1960s, where it did the equivalent of coin flipping, only it was flipping bits, random bits. And it could produce bits very quickly, and all of the bits could be recorded precisely. And so you could do an experiment where you have a random number generator going, and you ask somebody to mentally force it to create more ones than zeros. And then now create more zeros and ones, and now let the thing run all by itself as a calibration condition. And what you find after very long period studies like this and meta-analyses, looking at many studies by many different people, that there are biases that show up in the randomness. The systems that should be random are no longer behaving randomly. So that's about 50 years worth of study.
Now that is incredibly intriguing. With 50 years worth of data, that's a lot of data. And with all the analysis they've done, they have found more against than chance that it is absolutely happening for whatever reason. And when you take out the human element of the coin flip and you just make it a electronic circuit, then you can literally affect the electronics in the circuit to make the numbers jump up or down. And at the end of the show, I'll actually give you a website where if you're interested, you can go use a random number generator and see if you're able to flip the numbers up or down. But we'll get to that toward the end of the show.
Then in the 1990s, Roger Nelson at Princeton got the idea that maybe intention was only a piece of the puzzle, and maybe attention was also important. That the act of attending, which when we think of internally, attending is a kind of coherent mental state. You're focusing in on one thing. And if we can think of that as not simply being in your head, but being out there as well, then when you attend to something, it changes.
So put in more of a very simple layman's terms, to focus your intention upon one thing or another. And I will reference back to the first half of the show when we were talking about the rice experiment, and the girl that was explaining the experiment said that she focused her intention of love through the day on that jar, and she focused her negative intentions or energies on the hate jar, and we've seen a definite physical difference. So that's exactly what the good doctor here is saying, is focusing your intent basically.
And it changes in the direction of coherence. So if the target of your attention is randomness, then a cohered random system is, by definition, more orderly, becomes ordered. And so you can detect that order through statistics easily.
So randomness on a general coin flip over time would be 50-50, right? By chance, you're going to guess it 50% of the time, and you're going to be wrong 50% of the time. However, if you're able to guess it, I would say, or intend it to become heads more so than not, then it is going to show statistically in the data, and it's going to have empirical evidence that there is something else going on that scientism cannot explain.
So he started doing experiments where he'd take a random number generator, an electronic circuit, and put it in the vicinity of a group that was meditating, thinking that this would create a large amount of coherent attention. Sometimes people knew the random generator was there, and sometimes they didn't know. And he wanted to see whether the randomness would become orderly during the meditation. And after hundreds of such tests by Roger and me and a bunch of our colleagues, we came to the conclusion that it does become less random.
I like the fact that sometimes they knew the random number generator was in the room and sometimes they did not. It definitely makes for a good control between two groups, and still yet the random number generator became not so random number generator.
In a context where we can infer that there's mental coherence going on, sometimes due only to attention. So I think it was 1994, I did an experiment before, during, and after the announcement of the O.J. Simpson verdict in his murder trial. And this was a unique period in history in that it was the first time that I'm aware of, in modern time anyway, first time where there's actually one other I can think of, which was landing on the moon. But a first instance where hundreds of millions of people around the world knew that something interesting was going to happen at a stroke of a couple of seconds in the future. It was a reading of a verdict which would either say guilty or not guilty. And so imagine the amount of attention that's slowly focusing up to that moment. I figured this would make a great experiment because I could have a whole bunch of random number generators going, and we can look in time sequence what is happening to the randomness as we approach the moment of announcement of the verdict.
And for those who don't remember the O.J. Simpson trial, I do. It was wall-to-wall coverage every day, all day. It was one of the first court cases I remember being a wall-to-wall covered, all the news, all the time type deal. It was absolutely aggravating, to be honest with you. It was the only thing on TV. It was the only thing you heard about at all. But anyway, I love this experiment because there were a large mass of people focused on these events. The media was covering them. Everybody was covering them around the world. It was a famous celebrity person, and it was down to the final moment. So I love the idea that he thought to do this type of experiment in a moment like that. And as we're going to find later, moments like that appear more and more in the data as extremely significant.
Where we have maybe 1 billion people paying attention to it. So I did that. I had 5 random number generators going, 4 in the US and 1 in Europe, and tracked what was happening to the randomness as we got closer and closer to the verdict and the verdict being read and afterwards. And we found very clear evidence that there was a sudden peak in order in the random generators within seconds of the verdict being read. And of course, it was being read live and carried around the world on radio and television all over the place. So it was a live event worldwide.
And I can tell you that I've been looking at the Global Coherence Map, is what they call it, or the Global Consciousness Project. And you can go on to something called heartmath.com. That's HEARTMATH.com. And you're looking for the Global Consciousness Project. You can look at the live data feed. Now, when I say live, it's about a day or two behind. But I can tell you, ever since the 20th of January, for whatever reason, it has been spiking a lot, like every day. And I haven't seen it spike like that ever, as far as I know. It'll usually spike up for a day or so and then fade back down into more of a normal random pattern. But it has held spikes for almost a week above normal. So I can tell you that it is a lot of the world watching the same events going on in the world. A lot of consciousness focused on one point, and it is being detected in these random number generators that are located still across the world.
So Roger and I and a few colleagues were discussing this We later had another instance where Princess Diana was killed in a car crash, and her funeral was scheduled a week in advance. So we figured we can use that as another example of lots of attention around the world for one event. And we got, I think, 12 of us around the world got our random number generators going, and we analyzed the result, and again, was significant deviation from randomness towards order during the period of the funeral, when lots of people were watching.
And yet again, there's a clear example of the data showing significance, and that's still not even the beginning.
And we thought, well, this is great. This is an interesting experiment, but we had to go through a lot of work to get everybody to participate at the same time. So we decided to create a system that would be completely automatically running 24/7 with random number generators located in places around the world. So today, as of today, the project is going for 10 years. There's roughly 70 random generators in cities around the world, and it's been running for pretty much continuously for 10 years. So the most dramatic event that occurred, and oh, by the way, the reason we did this is because we knew that events would occur that we couldn't predict, and that would attract a lot of attention. We wanted to see what would happen under those cases. So
So they've got about 70 of what they call eggs, or random number generators, around the world going constantly. And that's where they get the data that I was speaking of a moment ago that I look at a lot. And it's where they are able to detect the difference in randomness. And it goes back to a really famous point that we've all heard of that showed an incredibly strange deviation in the data, one of the most massive in all of the data since they've been collecting in the Global Consciousness Project.
The best example in the worst case was 9/11. So 9/11 was not predicted as far as most people knew. And we had 37 random number generators, maybe 36 or 37 running at that time. And we were then able to look and see what was happening to randomness before, during, and after 9/11. And we subsequently, a bunch of us did an analysis, and we published it in Foundations of Physics Letters, which is a physics journal. Because what we found was unmistakable evidence that the randomness in all 36 generators went away. Slightly before 9/11, at 9/11, a little bit after, and then it went back to baseline. So you have a baseline randomness statistically. You have 9/11 approaching about 2 or 3 hours before 9/11. The whole system, the whole random system became orderly. And then 9/11 occurred, and it went through all kinds of strange random or non-random effects, and then it balanced out after a while and went back to being orderly. So
the most tragic event, I would say, in American history in my lifetime, not ever, but in my lifetime. And it's really amazing that it not only showed up on the chart when it occurred, but for 2 hours prior to it occurring, something in the literal collective consciousness, in my opinion, knew something was about to happen. And everybody said there was a really weird feeling that day. And certain people were saved and to this day are alive because there were different incidents that strangely occurred. That is one of the moments that I call a time-locked event, because I think it would have happened regardless of anything else happening in the world. I think 9/11 would have occurred. But that aside, the fact that the data shows up 2 hours prior, through the event, and shortly after the event, and I've heard stories say up to 24 hours around the event, but even the fact that it's just 2 hours, that is wild. How could anything have detected that happening 2 hours prior to it happening? Nobody knew it was going to happen but the bad guys. And apparently there were quite a few bad guys with the same intent that day. That is wildly mind-blowing. I just can't get over how incredible it is that it showed up so strongly in the data. And again, this is only one of many, but it is the biggest and best example of their random number generators having detection of something when then a correlating event over and over and over. And correlation is not causation, but after a while you start to wonder how many cases becomes causation, right?
This is one of now over 200 such events. Things like gigantic tsunamis, earthquakes, political events, the death of celebrities, unexpected things. Those kind of events go into our database. And what we do then is we have this ongoing, continuous random stream from around the world. We have a formal way of saying, well, this event is either predicted or an event occurs, and we go back later and we analyze the result through a standard method that we use. And we can see whether this worldwide random system is behaving randomly or not. And when you look at composite over the 200-some events, the odds against chance are over 1,000,000 to 1 now.
That's some pretty high odds right there. 1,000,000 to 1 against chance, right? There's no way that science has, scientism, let's be clear, has any way to explain that. Because remember, dogmatically, the brain is what creates consciousness, and it's stuck inside the brain, and it's all an illusion, and that's that. But we clearly see, and have seen all month long, that is nowhere near the case, from experiments that you can do in your home to random number generators that suddenly lose their randomness.
So we have good statistical reasons to believe that the random generators are not behaving randomly when there are large-scale events that attract a lot of attention. At this point, we don't know then which direction the arrow of causation goes. We don't know whether it's simply a lot of human minds that are somehow changing randomness, or whether this is a reflection of something bigger, something like a collective mind, of which the collective mind attends to something, and collective mind includes everything else, including what we think of as matter and energy. And so the attention, the change that we see in randomness may be the same in some way. It's the same kind of organizing event that changes random events. It also changes our attention. But again, I don't know which direction the arrow of causation goes, and maybe it's so complex there is no single arrow. Maybe some giant system of some type.
And of course, we know maybe means speculation, so let's be clear about that. But it is really interesting, perhaps, and I do believe that there is a collective consciousness. I've always said that there's just something that is connecting all humans. And the reason that I personally come up on this idea, this isn't something that I read about or something that I, just kind of was interested in or came across in studies. No. This is something that I actually thought that I'd come up with myself. Check this out. So I've worked around the public since I was about 13 or 14 years old, helping different volunteer things, stuff like that. As well as when I was 15, 16, I got into restaurant work, and I worked around the public a lot. And one thing I found in restaurant, well, two things. Number one, people move in spurts. You'll get a group of people, then you'll get none. Then you'll get a group of people, then you get none. That's really strange to me. However, that's not the strangest part. I remember working at Dairy Queen. This was a running joke. Every restaurant I've ever worked at, I've noticed this since I was really young. But working at Dairy Queen, it was a running joke what the item of the day was going to be. Now, I don't mean the manager's special item that they select. No. What would happen is we would get people coming through the drive-thru and the front counter all day, like in any restaurant. But these people would be ordering the exact same thing, all the way down to a double cheeseburger, no tomato. I remember we sold 15 of those things one day. It wasn't on sale. There was nothing special about it. Just everybody and their brother wanted a double cheeseburger, no tomato. The next day, it was a Heath Blizzard. The day after that, it was onion rings. And yeah, I'm not even making that up. Onion rings. But anyway, it was really weird. And I actually got it down to the about 18-hour mark. I noticed that the item would change. It was really, really odd. And it's something that I noticed that, these people aren't meeting in the parking lot going, you go through the drive-thru, I'm going to go inside, we're going to order this, ready, set, go. That's not clearly, not what's going on. That's clearly not the case. So why is everybody all of a sudden ordering, and I say everybody, the majority of the people, all of a sudden ordering these same items? And I've never to this day been able to explain it. And I come up with the idea really, really young, working in restaurant, of the collective consciousness or collective unconscious, as Mr. Carl Jung called it. I thought I had come up with the idea. I really was proud of myself. I thought, I've realized something that nobody's realized before. This is incredible. And when I got to looking into it and actually researching it, turns out Carl Jung beat me by a couple decades. But that only goes to verify my thought being more correct. This is something that I personally noticed, I personally theorized, and it turns out I'm not the only one to have noticed and theorized this idea. So I'm not saying it's 100% true, but I fully believe that there is a hive mind of sorts, a collectiveness, if you will, a connection between every single last human. I can't explain it. I can't. I really can't. But it's something that I've noticed, that Carl Jung has noticed, that many people have noticed, and it really would go a long way to explain the Global Consciousness Project and why all of our intent or all of our consciousness focused on one thing can make a difference. And it also brings me back to this idea of the 100th monkey experiment. You guys have all heard of that, I'm sure, where after a certain number of a population of monkeys started doing one action, the monkeys of that species all across the world started copying said action. And what's really interesting to me is people don't know how many monkeys it actually was. That's why it's called the 100th monkey. Nobody was counting. They didn't expect it actually be a thing at the time until they realized something had occurred. But what gets me is you have this thing in society called a tipping point. And it said that 10% of any society, when it reaches that, whatever it may be, an idea, a thought, a concern, whatever it is, when 10% of the population are saturated with this idea, it becomes a tipping point, and the entire population and society tend to go more toward this idea or this thought pattern. So again, it shows this collective consciousness among not only the human species, but also the monkey in question I was actually speaking of was a macaque monkey. It shows it across different forms of conscious beings. So it's not necessarily something that is limited to human consciousness. And that's just my opinion. But what do you guys think? Are you guys going to do the experiment? I would love to see your results over the riponrabbithole.com. There's another experiment if you're really interested in it. There's a website run by a buddy of mine. You guys might know him from the Mandela Effect Conference, Chronos Magos. Anyway, he runs a site called Theta Stream. That's THETASTREAM. Sorry, I'm grabbing the card right now. .app. ThetaStream.app. Once again, that's THETASTREAM.app, and it'll work in any web browser. And this is a site where you can use a random number generator and try to affect it with your consciousness from a distance. Try to make it go all high numbers or all low numbers. And it's something really fun to play with and just sit there and concentrate and focus your intended attention on it and see what you can do. And there's a number of different games. Did you sign up for a free login over there? And there's a number of different games you can actually play, whether it be guessing which one, kind of like a hand flipper, which hand is it in, which hand is the ball in, or a couple different games. So if you're interested in trying to test or level up your skills in the consciousness arena and consciousness affecting reality, mind over matter, then definitely go check that site out. I highly recommend it, ladies and gentlemen. But what do you guys think? Do you think all this is real? Are you going to try the experiments? Do you think that it's maybe just all in our head? Do you think that maybe that it could really be a consciousness field or a collective consciousness that connects all of us? Or do you think we might need to go back to school and learn a little bit more common sense? In the end, ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, January 27th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the den may be closing, but don't you worry, the weekend fun is only just beginning. That's right. The Wolf will be back tomorrow night, January 28th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with an all-new episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Tomorrow night, we're going to discuss psychic phenomena. That's right, are you psychic? Come on back tomorrow night if you think you know what we're going to talk about, and especially if you don't. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be building on the conversation we've been having all month, and especially the conversation we've had tonight. So definitely come check us out tomorrow night. The Den will reopen 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows here on the network start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, including the other animals of radio here on the network. Mr. AJ the Ripon Rabbit, that's right. He will be back on Friday, January 29th, 2021, with an all-new episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show. That's right. I really almost said Dark Wolf's Den Show there, no joke. But seriously, ladies and gentlemen, AJ will be back on Friday, January 29th, with an all-new episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show, where he will be freely talking about freely speaking. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, freedom of speech is something that is utterly important and a God-given right, and it's something that we really need to talk about and learn how to speak freely. And then, ladies and gentlemen, on Saturday, January 30th, 2021, come on back for another episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, where he's going to discuss fear itself. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing to fear but fear itself. That's right. Face your fears, because fear itself is the only real thing that is to be scared of. Then on Sunday, January 31st, 2021, AJ the Ripon Rabbit's going to be back with one more episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show to round out this amazing weekend. That's right, he's going to be talking about being independent. Come on back for a great episode and a wonderful discussion on independence and what it means to be independent. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you come back all weekend long, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio, RiponRabbitHole.com. Speaking of RiponRabbitHole.com, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you hop on over there and check out what we have going on. We have totally rebuilt the site. If you haven't been there in 2021, it is Ripon Rabbit Hole Part 2, and let me tell you, it is upgraded. You guys do not want to miss this. If you enjoy the ability to speak freely, do make sure you come over and speak with us, ladies and gentlemen, on the RiponRabbitHole.com. While you're there, make sure that you sign up for our mail list. we send out an email Wednesday, so we only send out one email. We do not sell your information. We do not collect your information. We only use it to give you information of what we got coming up with our extended 5-day weekends here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. Also, while you're over at the RiponRabbitHole.com, do make sure that you check out the Dark Wolves Didn't Show page over there. That's right. Make sure you come over and give us a shout out and even drop into the forum and say hi to everybody over there in the Dark Wolves Den Show page, and as well as everybody down the rabbit hole. There's been a growing base of people coming over, dropping down the rabbit hole over there. That is our social media alternative for those that love free speech and love to share ideas about things that are considered a little more taboo in today's world. So come on over. Make sure you sign up for a membership over the RiponRabbitHole.com. Drop down the rabbit hole with us where the conversation continues 24/7. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Also, while you're over there, if you'd like to hang out with the Wolf, myself, Jerry, the Dark Wolf, stop on by the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That's where I'm going to be right after this show here in just a couple minutes. And I'm sure the old crew that has been in there every night with us is going to be hanging out back there. And I cannot wait to see you guys along. And it would be wonderful to meet everybody. There's people from all around the world. It's an international group that comes in. We have a great time. We have wonderful conversations. And we'd love to have you join us. We can fit up to 50 people in the room at any given time, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope to see you guys over there. Once again, that is the RiponRabbitHole.com. That is RiponRabbitHole.com. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it for us. And on behalf of all our amazing mod team over there in the YouTube chat room, and a shout out to Ripon, Wisconsin, and the 49 countries we are broadcasting to worldwide every time we come on. We love having every last one of you guys along for the ride. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of AJ the Ripon Rabbit, Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musco, Walt House, everybody involved in the Ripon Common Sense Radio team, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And remember, until tomorrow night, stay awake, but dare to dream. How? Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky not a sinner? Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.